Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about Christie 2024 and why its large S isn't looking so hot. It's looking more round, if anything, inflated like a hot air balloon, going to pop any second, okay? Burst at the seams, break any size 67 belt that he has, okay? Size 80 pants that he has, okay? Because typically I wouldn't make these jokes, but the guy is so large, we have to make those jokes, okay? Now listen, folks, we're going to be reading an article from Politico, of course, and part of the reason why is because we're going to look at 2016, how he ran 8 years ago, and how that compares to today. Of course, he did a lot better back then. Now he's not looking so hot. So, you're 8 years removed from that last performance, as well as we're also 8 years removed on top of his good governorship, so called. Now, again, to contextualize everything, he was a good governor circa 2011, 12 ish, okay? Now, the problem being is that the guy was still relatively young into politics. He was like in his mid 40s at this point, okay? You would think that's well past your life expectancy if you're that obese. So, he was pretty old by that time, but I guess he still in his mind thought he was a young little girl. But the point is that he was middle-aged in politics, and so he thought, I have more time to run for president. Little did he know, well, actually, that time went by because, he skipped the opportunity of running in 2012, which was a huge thing because besides him and Mitch Daniels, he was he was one of the more prominent people that could have ran in 2012 but opted not to. Really, and that was unfortunate because he would have been a better candidate earlier on. Not because of age or anything, but because his governorship, as popular and bipartisan as it was, would have been more flattering in the 2012 context as compared to 2016 when things were more polarized, mind you, if you were around then. Anyway, the point being is that the guy was typically in a position to actually run for president, and now he's not so much. And so right now we're looking at somebody who peaked in political prime like 10 years ago. And so now he's running. And you might think, well, why is that? And it's like, well, I don't even know. So let's break into that article. But before I do that, I got to also add this in. So right now, you have to watch that Romney lost the election to Obama, in part because he wasn't that charismatic. Now, Christie is a really charismatic politician. I'll give him that. He's a great politician. In fact, there's a viral clip that has millions of views on it, as far as I know, that he basically had a school board meeting or something, a town hall in New Jersey like 10 years ago, where he completely set a girl straight, this Karen, because basically what he did was he completely told her the truth. These people go to these PTA meetings or whatever it is, and they're like, oh my God, this school sucks. And then he basically breaks it down verbatim, like, okay, well, here's the problem with this, right? He says, I raised the funding for the schools 8 semesters in a row. They haven't gotten better, but it's because of this. It is because of this legislation that this didn't work out, and this and this and this. And he gave you an itemized report as to how things went wrong. And he said it in a way that was actually entertaining. Very few politicians have that talent, okay? You need charisma to be a politician. You need charisma to be a YouTuber, right? So again, when you're trying to entertain people, you ought to actually captivate the audience. And so that's something that I will give him. He can also entertain a whole bevy of a buffet item set, okay? Because the guy, again, fat, low-hanging fruit, but we know he's not going to eat the fruit anyway. So I think it's completely fair for me to make fun of him for that. Anyway, if you were to read this article, you'll actually ascertain as to why he shouldn't run in 2024. So the title of the thing goes by Charlie Mantizian or whatever. I guess he's Armenian maybe. Anyway, Christie bent the knee in 2016. He's still paying for it. Okay, so the angle is that he bent the knee to Donald Trump. He endorsed Donald Trump when he talked a lot of garbage about Donald Trump. Keep in mind that the context was that he took down Marco Rubio for Donald Trump in a cannibalistic way because basically the way that the primary was set up after New Hampshire and whatnot, well into the race, was that Donald Trump was the front runner with like 35% of the vote or something. And so he had a plurality, but a pretty weak one. And so if all the anti-Trump candidates were to consolidate each other's fan bases and work against Trump, then they could win. But unfortunately for people like Christie, the coalition never formed. And again, think about it. There was a good like 2/3 of the Republican Party that didn't want Donald Trump at the time in the summer of 2016 or whatever. But the difference being is that obviously there was like 6 different candidates between Kasich, Rubio, Rand Paul, all these other people. They were splitting up the non-Trump vote. And so with that being said, they basically let Donald Trump divide and conquer. And part of the reason why Marco Rubio was shot off by Christie was because Christie wanted to eat Marco Rubio's support and then make that into an amalgam that would have beat Trump's support base. But because he couldn't figure that out, that didn't work out, obviously. And in part because the politicians are so selfish individualistically, they said, well, I know that I can, Ted Cruz, for instance, could have said, okay, well, John Kasich, I'll work with you. You know what? I'll drop out. I'll be your vice president. And we'll take over the Trump position. But instead, they sought to be president and kingmaker themselves, and so nobody actually humbled themselves. They all played chicken. They're like, okay, well, somebody is going to drop out, and then I'll gain their support. Fact is that, that never worked out and materialized because Donald Trump basically played them against each other like a mob boss, which is just really intelligent for him to do, right? So then inevitably you'll have Chris Christie, who wanted a cabinet position or whatever. I think he wanted attorney general 5 years ago from Donald Trump. So he's like, okay, well, I'm going to endorse him. He bent the knee. Now, let's see how that plays out, because now we have the similar situation where you have the incumbent nominee, basically 2024 rolls around, and we have Donald Trump with the vast majority of the support, like 60% of the entire base supports him in the primary. And then you have Chris Christie, a non-entity, a non-factor, just announced today, right? So now you have somebody who's most likely going to try to vie for that position. And it's all beguiled by the fact that, of course, the guy basically submitted to Trump after, okay, so he crapped on Trump in the primary. Trump said, whatever, I can still use you, right? In a pragmatic sense. So then he tries to get into Trump's league, and then they kind of split up after a little bit. And with that being said, he still bent the knee, though, and that's the optics failure for him, because he's going to say, like, well, I'm not Trump, I hate him now, but you bent the knee and you kissed the ring. So it's kind of like, okay, well, look at the hand, there's a smooch on it by this fat bastard, and that's going to be Chris Christie. And so typically you're going to look at somebody like that and say, well, you're a two-face. And that two-face so happens to have like 3 different double chins. And so you've got to really look at the facts and say, well, it's not looking so hot for him. But let's finally get into the article 6.5 minutes into this, okay? And mind you, this is from a 2016 picture, okay, for context. Now, let's look over here, right? So there's obstacles for the New Jersey governor, of course. He has the highest unfavorable ratings for any candidate in the field. So again, he's polarizing like Donald Trump. Okay, so that's part of the problem with him too. 60% say that they would not support him under any circumstance, which is really rough for him. Okay, that's not good at all, because if you're going to be Donald Trump, you have to be well liked by everyone, like DeSantis was 2 years ago. Because if you don't have that universal support, then the Trump people are not going to show out for you in the general election, and you will lose. Anyway, so let's look at this. It's a tall order, in part because Christie fell flat in New Hampshire during his 2016 bid, right? Now, if you look there, he held 100 town halls in the state of New Hampshire, and he still lost. It's pretty rough, isn't it, right? And so it's not looking really good for him. And so now you're going on to the next paragraph, and what you'll notice is that he basically finished 6th place in a primary. That's really bad. And then he dropped out of the primary after getting utterly felted. And he delivered, a Super Tuesday endorsement of Donald Trump 2 weeks later. So basically, Donald Trump was on the defensive against Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz before Super Tuesday, and Christie unexpectedly appeared by Trump's side at a Texas rally in Fort Worth and delivered a blessing. Even by the standards of the unpredictable 2016 GOP primary, Christie's endorsement was a stunner, actually. After spending the campaign referring to Trump as a carnival barker, belittling his readiness for the White House, and talking about the importance of governance, that the New Jersey governor suddenly provided Trump with the critical validation from a respected member of the Republican establishment. I just don't think that he's suited to be the president of the United States, Christie said. Now, I don't think his temperament is suited for that, and I don't think his experience is either. So that's his quote. So again, multiple times talking bad about Donald Trump, stuff that you can't really take back when you put it into the public record, even if it was 7 years ago. Anyway, until that moment, Donald Trump didn't have a single endorsement from a governor or a senator. He just had 2 endorsements from congressmen. Okay? Anyway, and Christie was no ordinary endorser. His star might have been tarnished by the infamous Bridgegate scandal, which again is a psyop by the liberal left, obviously. But then again, whatever. And his own presidential bid might have gone nowhere. But his imprimatur. Okay, come on. These 110 IQ article writers cannot be putting these words in. Okay, I'm Mexican. I don't know what that means. Imprimatur, whatever. Anyway, so we'll go on and read more about this. So, quote, "Boy, we were wrong," publisher Joseph McQuaid wrote. "Watching Christie kiss Donald's ring this weekend and make excuses for the man Christie himself sought as unfit for the presidency demonstrated how wrong we were. Rather than standing up to the bully, Christie bent his knee. In doing so, he rejected the very principles of the campaign that attracted our support in the first place." End quote, right? By the time Christie left office in 2018, he ranked in the polls as the most unpopular governor in state history. Democrats captured the governorship with Phil Murphy upon his departure. At the time of his endorsement, Christie explained that Trump offered the best chance of beating Hillary Clinton. He later said he wanted to make Trump a better candidate, which is just gay, right? So now he's on a mea culpa tour, which is bad optics, obviously. And so that's what you got to say about this. Now, in respect to how we view things today, I personally think that this is a bad look for Chris Christie. Chris Christie is obviously in a position where he's not very he doesn't have a good leverage is my argument. I don't think that he really has the temperament either. So he suffers from a lot of the same things that Donald Trump has in regards to, like, for instance, people will make fun of Donald Trump's tan. They will make fun of his blonde toupee or whatever it is. And, with Christie, obviously, there's going to be a ton of fat jokes. And, that's going to be par for the course. Moreover, we obviously have the bad optics of him being so damn fat. And that shows subconsciously people will understand that, what? How are you supposed to control the nuclear codes yet you cannot control your waistline? I mean, it's something that's very simple. And, it'd be one thing if you were overweight and, reasonably, healthy like Donald Trump. But instead, you have somebody like Chris Christie, who's obese as all hell. And beyond that, of course, we have somebody who's also unpopular. Again, 60% in a survey. 2/3 of people polled basically are saying that Chris Christie is not somebody that they would support. So if we're talking about Donald Trump having 60% of the support already, plus 40% or 60% of people also saying they wouldn't vote for Chris Christie, what is the ceiling? 40%? So now what is he hoping? That Donald Trump gets arrested, drops out of the primary or something, and then he'll get 40% of the support between like 5 other different candidates? I really don't think that's a likely way to win the presidency, nor is it a way to actually win any sort of leverage. There are some candidates throughout history that have said, well, you know what, I'll run, get 10% of the vote, and then use that for like a cabinet position or something, like kind of like what Kamala Harris did for vice presidency in 2020. But inevitably, what you'll find out is that that rarely pans out. And, if it does pan out, who honestly cares, right? If he gets put into a cabinet, so what? And you can, part of the fame that he had in 2012 was that he was a good governor. But thereafter, 2013 and so on, with the Bridgegate scandal, so-called, basically his popularity diminished over time. And granted, it's a very blue state that he was in, but unpopularity is unpopularity. So if he were to go on the debate stage and say, I was a good governor, the fact is, and even in 2016 they brought this up, and it will only get worse, his disapproval rating is sky high, not only with the Republican primary, but just additionally with the people in New Jersey. So all you have to do if you're Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, etc., is to say, well, you know what, dude, you're unpopular as a governor, you suck at it, and your disapproval ratings are terrible, and obviously you were replaced, and during your governorship towards the second half, the second term, obviously, he wasn't that good. And by that, I mean, like, just generally, right? And you can blame a lot of what happened in his governorship and his tenure in New Jersey as being problems with the Democrat House and Senate or whatever. But the fact is that people don't really read into that. So the common American that's watching the debate stage will not be able to tell him apart from other Democrats because his results are really bad. And one of the talking points that was brought up in the debate stage in 2015 was in concurrence with the fact that the credit score rating was really low for somebody like Chris Christie at the time as governor. The credit rating, the debt was really high, is what I mean, basically, to dumb it down for you guys. So the credit rating and the debt was really bad in New Jersey. Inflation, stuff like that, interest rates, it all plays a part, right? So now you're saying, okay, well, this was bad, this was bad, this was bad, and your disapproval was bad in New Jersey. What do you have to show for it? It's Democrat controlled now, Chris Christie. What's going on? There's no sense of progression here. And on top of that, he has the underlying factor that he kissed the Trump ring. And, ideally for these people that are never Trumpers, the neocons and whatever, the suburbanites, they ideally would want somebody who hated Trump from the beginning. But instead you have somebody who actually kissed Donald Trump's ring before. And if you want to say, well, he's running for a cabinet position under Trump, well, it turns out that Trump probably won't trust him with anything because, again, he stabbed him in the back, so to speak. If that's the case, then what does he expect to get? And then with respect to, well, he'll get a cabinet position with Ron DeSantis. Number one, Ron DeSantis won't even win. Second of all, even if he did somehow, Ron DeSantis will say, well, you know what? Are you popular to 60% of the primary? No, you're not. People are saying that they wouldn't vote for you. So then why would I appoint you vice president? What does Chris Christie add to the ticket instead of just overflowing it, right? Like, you could expect to get the presidential ballot and then have like half of his gun sticking out, right? And saying like, what the hell is this piece of flab doing right here? And so realistically, what does Chris Christie add to the ticket? Again, is he from the state of Arizona, Florida, some sort of swing state, or even something that's even close to being competitive? No, he's from New Jersey. What does he add then? Nothing really. And so he's just a walking, and by walking, I mean like graciously, like I'm being very generous walking, but more so just grubbing, burping. Anyway, he's just a walking liability, so to speak. And something like that is not something that will work in the Republican primary or the Democrat primary for that record. And so at that point, what do I expect for him as a presidential candidate? He might get 1 to 5% of the primary vote early on and then drop out and then try to leverage that into something. Fact is that he probably won't get squat like in regards to a cabinet position or anything. So just keep that in mind. So I don't think he'll go anywhere. Christie 2024, complete waste of everybody's time. That's my conclusion. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Comment down below what you thought, by the way. All right, I'm out.